The Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations, and I'll always call it CFAA because it's too much of a mouthful otherwise, represents the owners and managers of close to 1 million residential rental units across Canada through 11 associations and direct landlord memberships. The private rental housing sector provides close to 4 million rental homes for 9 million Canadians of all ages, incomes, and situations. The rental homes range from apartments in high-rise towers through apartments in smaller walk-up apartment buildings to rented single-family homes and everything in between those two ends of the spectrum. As well as leading CFAA, I am an Ontario lawyer and I specialize in residential tenancies law. In a single-family home, what an owner-occupant does largely affects only themselves. Whereas in multiple unit dwellings, an occupant's actions in one unit can very often have significant effect on the occupants of other units. With some restrictions as to grandfathering, landlords in most of the provinces can ban smoking in rental buildings. Non-smokers' rights groups want landlords to ban smoking in all apartment buildings, and I speak of both tobacco and marijuana in saying that. Health Canada is considering whether to advocate for provincial bans on smoking in multi-unit dwellings, whether those are apartments in condos or rental buildings, and even though those are people's homes, of course. With respect to growing cannabis, that is even more problematic than cannabis smoking. Concerns include safety hazards, health hazards, interference with other residents, and potential damage to the building. The bill would allow up to 4 plants of any height in all dwellings, which includes rented dwellings and multi-unit dwellings. That position is problematic for the reasons that follow. CFA urges Parliament to prohibit all cannabis growing in all dwellings for the reasons that I'm about to get into. We support the position of the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH. On March 29th, their senior scientist, Benedict Fisher, told this committee the current bill includes the provision for home growing, home cultivation, as if this was a necessary endeavor to legal cannabis and make legal consumption available. We categorically believe that this is a misguided position. In other words, cannabis can be legalized, it can be used without also permitting home growing. A ban on home growing is also the position of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and I note now that Quebec and Manitoba have either announced or enacted that they are banning all home growing. So, and one other note, we also agree with the Association of Chiefs of Police that if home growing is allowed or not, there needs to be a limit on the possession of cannabis in private dwellings, as well as a limit on possession in the public sphere. So my further remarks go to the ideal cannabis growing conditions, which are not conducive to human health. For optimal cannabis growing, and I get this from a website called I love growing marijuana.com. It is a pro-marijuana website, and until I went to that site a year and a half ago because of this exercise, I didn't know so much about marijuana. But now I think I know a certain amount. To grow marijuana well, or cannabis well, you need higher humidity, you need higher temperatures than are good for people or than is good for buildings. You need ample light. In a Canadian winter, ideally you're going to use a 600-watt high-pressure sodium light, and that has quite the power draw. Think of 10 60-watt bulbs. It's the equivalent to that or more. In addition, a substantial amount of cannabis can be harvested from a single plant of less than 1 meter in height. This site describes the screen of green technique called SCROG, in which a grower takes a plant, puts a chicken wire mesh above it, cuts off the top, and then it sprouts widely. So from one plant, you could be covering an area like so, you know, a yard or more wide, a yard or more deep, and you could grow considerable marijuana on that. The site suggests a single plant can yield up to a pound, 500 grams of dried cannabis. And given 2 or 3 months for a plant to be ready for harvesting, that would allow 4 or 6 crops a year. That would enable someone to grow 16 to 24 pounds of cannabis per year, which is substantially more than anyone would ever use personally. There are also issues with respect to drying it in ovens, which again adds to power draw, and these things lead to potential electrical problems and potential fire safety problems. So we submit that it is not practical to limit home growing in multi-dwelling units without limiting it to single-family homes. There's too much of an argument about discrimination involved in that. We submit that for everyone's sake, what is important is that the home growing of marijuana be banned. And I may say one more thing. In my 15 years leading CFAA, I have never received as many calls from landlords and from tenants as I have on this issue. The vast bulk of those callers do not want home growing. Most also, frankly, do not want cannabis smoking near them, but I believe we're primarily focusing on marijuana growing today. So that's all I had to say by way of opening, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dickie, for being succinct and to the point.